Well, nice to meet you,
Okay.
Chris. Hit me up. What do
Well,
you want to talk about?
so I am a religious person. I'm a Christian, and I believe in the traditional definition of marriage. And I have spiritual reasons for that, but it also comes down to just like millennium of tradition of our society defining religion in one way. And I don't want to limit gay people or trans people's ability to express themselves or who they want to love. And I don't want to limit their civil rights. I simply want to maintain the tradition, the like historic and traditional definition of a term. Does that make
So,
sense?
your marriage is still going to be valid, and if you view marriage whichever way you view it, your rights are being upheld by the state. So I don't see how allowing gay people to marry in any way takes away from your rights or your marriage. I mean, right?
Yeah, it does because it changed. The way I view it is that gay people and trans people, if they want to have a civil union, they can have any civil union they want, and they would get the
So,
same
but wait,
protections
I
under
don't
the
see
law.
I don't see how having a gay couple married takes away from your marriage in any way. Or are you married, by the way?
I'm not married.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But like, say like, there's no way in which allowing gay people to become married takes away from straight marriages in any way.
Well, see, this is where it's like I have to be really specific about what I'm trying to explain. I don't. It's not. I don't want to allow them to have a bond or a civil union. It's literally the definition I take issue with because
Well,
we've changed the definition.
you know that like hundreds of years ago, white people said the exact same thing about black and white people marrying, like interracial marriage. Like this argument you're levying, well, like that's just my traditional view of marriage. This would apply equally to people trying to deny interracial marriages.
Um, I don't know that it would apply equally. We've never had a
The argument
definition.
applies equally.
Well, you're comparing a time when we had slavery and there were no rights given to people of color, right?
Well, also after slavery, there was a lot of pushes to ban interracial marriage because,
There were
these people
pushes
saw that
to,
it
but
did not fit
we
their
never.
traditional view of marriage.
Yeah, but we never had national the definition of marriage encompassing only one race can marry itself. That was never the definition of marriage.
Wasn't it a Supreme Court case that had to change the national law to allow interracial people to marry? It was, I believe, it was a Supreme Court case. Supreme Court interracial marriage case. Where was it? Yeah, it was in 1967. So
Yeah, but this has
there were so many laws across the United States which banned interracial marriage, and this wasn't overturned until 1967. I mean, literally, you only have to go back 60 years for interracial marriage to be banned in many states using this exact same traditionalist argument that you're using.
well, it's not this. It's not the same argument. This was society being segregated totally, meaning kids couldn't go to schools with each other. People couldn't drink out of the same water fountains. It wasn't a marriage issue. That was a segregation issue.
It was
And what
also a marriage issue. I'm telling you that it was 1967 when specifically just interracial marriage was allowed. This, in addition to being a segregation issue, this was also a marriage issue.
Yeah, it manifested as a marriage issue, but it's not marriage being the issue. The issue is segregation. Like
So
black people couldn't shop in the
do you
same.
support interracial marriage?
Well, of course, because it's
Why is
never
that?
been that. Because it's one. Because any male can marry any female. It doesn't. Race doesn't matter
Well, why does race not matter?
because it never has mattered. We can go back to like biblical times, and we had literally
Well,
Jews
it
marrying
seems that
non-Jews.
in the laws of the United States, race absolutely did matter when it comes to marriage. So from this traditional viewpoint, race absolutely did matter.
Okay, but do you understand, Naomi? That's not stemming from an issue with the definition of marriage. That's
No,
stemming from
they
a
tried to definitionally exclude black people from marrying white people. They tried to say that the definition of marriage, the traditional definition, is two people of the same race of opposite sex marrying, like that was the definition they tried to put forth, saying that this is our traditional definition. They literally did this exact same thing where they tried to definitionally exclude interracial couples.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna like explain this any simpler. Other than there's millions of black Christians who believe in the traditional definition of marriage, so it's not a race issue for them either. Like
Okay. So
they're
I know that for them, it might not be a race issue, but my point is that your reasoning about I get to define what marriage is for everyone based on my traditional views would also allow for an equally valid argument against interracial marriage, which I think is abhorrent.
well, I agree with you, it is. I just totally disagree with your reasoning here. The definition of marriage was never included one racial group within itself.
It did used to include that in many states across the country.
I've not seen that. I don't understand that. They're
So
saying
you
the
can look up
definition of
Loving v.
marriage is a
Virginia.
white man and a white woman is the definition of marriage, or it was a state law that coincided with segregation in general.
Yeah,
Like,
so Virginia's Racial Integrity Act of 1924 criminalized marriage between people who were classified as white and people who were classified as colored.
say it again. The what of
The
1924?
Virginia's Racial Integrity Act of 1924
Yeah,
criminalized marriage between people who were classified as white and
sure.
people who were classified as colored, and because this was the definition which the law put forth.
Well, it's a Racial Integrity Act in 1924, which means it's a segregation law that's now attaching itself to the institution of marriage because segregation is the issue. But this is not the definition of marriage being practiced for thousands of years. It's a
Okay, if
segregated
this is a
society.
segregate wait, if this is a segregation issue, if the Racial Integrity Act of 1924 is a segregation issue, then
Yeah.
excluding gay people from marriage is also a segregation issue. You are trying to segregate gay people out of the institution of marriage.
I don't believe it can exist. Like in my definitional view, it doesn't exist anyway. But I'm not trying to exclude
That's
them from.
exactly what the racist white people would have said in the 1920s.
No, I don't think it is. I
No,
think
that's
you're.
exactly what they said.
Okay.
They said that this is our definition of marriage.
Yeah, but it wasn't the definition of marriage. It's something that
No,
they
but it was. That
manufactured.
was the definition that was on the law books, thanks to Virginia's Racial Integrity Act of 1924.
Yeah, I mean, Nazis did the same thing with relations with like Jewish people. It's something made, but
Yeah,
that's
and they were
not.
wrong to do so. They were
I
wrong to
agree.
put forth that regressive and segregatory definition of marriage, like you're doing. You do realize that you're the one who's being
It,
like the Schnazis in this analogy, right?
no, I don't think so. I don't think
You're the
holding.
one who's trying to say that marriage is not allowed to include people of group X. Like you're the one who's doing the thing that the Schnazis did.
I'm saying by its definition. Well, I'm just going through with a traditional definition of a word. Like I'm
So
not trying to limit.
you
What is
think the
it? What is it?
you think the
What is it?
Schnazis had a point or something?
I don't know what you're talking about now, man. I'm talking about a definition of the word marriage. I'm not talking
Yeah,
about like
that's
hurting
also what
Jewish
they would have said. They
people.
would have said the definition would have excluded Jewish people or
No,
something
they
similar.
wouldn't have. They would have said Jewish people aren't human. Like it was an entirely different reasoning for what they're doing. And just so you know, Orthodox Jews do not ordain same-sex marriage. Orthodox
There
Jews
are some
agree
Jewish
with
sects that
me.
do orthodox same-sex
Not
marriage.
Orthodox, not Orthodox Jews. So are they not too, Naomi? Or
Orthodox gay
Orthodox Jewish?
Jews.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm seeing that there are some Orthodox gay Jews out there. Yeah.
No, there's Orthodox gay Jews exist. I'm saying Orthodox Judaism does not ordain same-sex marriage because they hold to a religious definition.
Let's see. Times of Israel says that there is a small but growing number of U.S. Orthodox rabbis officiating same-sex weddings. So I think you're just factually wrong about that.
Say it again.
This is from the Times of Israel. It says small but
Yeah.
growing number of U.S. Orthodox rabbis officiating same-sex weddings. So
Officiating same-sex marriage.
there are Orthodox rabbis who do officiate gay marriage.
Yeah, there might be a few that like do that, but Orthodox Judaism itself, meaning within the religion, it's not recognized.
Well, those rabbis are recognizing it.
They're not. They're officiating weddings on their own.
If they're
The religion
officiating it,
isn't
they're
recognizing
recognizing
it.
it. You do realize that, right?
Not and not as a
Like here's the
representative
thing.
like to the whole.
You're just going to play every semantic game you can to discriminate against gay people. I mean, we can play semantic games to discriminate against interracial marriage, like the racist segregationists did. We can play
Yeah,
semantic word games to discriminate against Jewish marriages, like the Schnazis did. But now we
sure.
come to today where you're doing the exact same thing against gay people for no good reason at all, because the existence of gay marriage does not take anything away from straight marriage.
Okay, let me ask you a question. By me holding to a traditional view of marriage, right, between a man and a woman, but
So
saying
you're
that,
allowed to have that view and you're allowed to have that marriage, but
and
you're
they
not
do,
allowed to infringe upon the rights of others.
and why would me allowing gays to have a civil union and have the same right, but just not allow for the word usage? What right do you lose in that?
The right
Why
to
does that
marriage.
bother you? No, you don't, because you have a civil union.
Is a civil union a marriage?
No,
Then you don't have equal rights because you don't have the right to marry. That is
but you
not
have.
the same right.
But what do you lose? Like, what do
So
you lose? What do
what do
you
you
lose the
lose?
ability to do?
You lose the respect of the state. You lose this essentially you lose this equal right to straight people.
Yeah, to like have a definition, right? So it's kind of like, I don't know, at a certain point, it's kind of
So
like,
I'm not trying to exclude you from the definition of marriage, but why do you have the right to exclude me from the definition of marriage?
because it comes down to reality. Because I believe it, like
What do you
words
mean
have
by
meaning.
reality here?
There's a definition, like when we have a definition to a word, like I can't all of a sudden call somebody tall because it's mean. Like if somebody is short but they want to be tall, and now I have to call them tall because that's offensive to people, and it's like, but they're not
Yeah,
tall.
but like even the commonly recognized definition of marriage includes gay couples. Like if you just Google search
Because we
define
changed it.
marriage, you
Yeah,
get the
but because
Oxford
we,
language definition, which says
yeah,
the
it's
legally
changed.
or formally recognized union of two people as partners in a personal relationship. That has
Yeah,
nothing to do with like their gender or their biological sex. It's just the
changed
legal or formally recognized union of two people. That's it. Like
the
the common
legal.
definition of marriage, which you get from Google, doesn't say
Yeah,
it has to be straight marriage.
yeah, it's a new definition. So we've changed that recently in years. That's a new definition.
You do know that like marriages that included gay people is not a new concept. Like ancient Greece and ancient Mesopotamia also allowed this.
I love that you brought up ancient Greece because they would often marry men to like young prepubescent boys, and they would have a religious pagan ceremony. So, is that something you feel like we should respect people who have that
So
inclination as well?
I don't condone underage relationships that lack consent. However, in ancient Greece and ancient Mesopotamia, for example, it
That
was
lack
legal for
consent.
two gay adults to marry each other, and I think they should have the right to do so. That is also a traditional view of marriage, which includes gay people.
So my understanding is in ancient Greece it was actually like accepted for a grown man and a young boy to have a religious ceremony. Um, and you said you take issue if something is non-consensual. So should I understand that if a 10-year-old consents to a
Do you
marriage
know
with a
what
50-year-old,
statute?
you're okay with that?
Do you know what the statutory clause of consent is?
You didn't want to answer my question.
So I am answering your question. I'm saying that that is non-consensual for statutory reasons because
What is
children
the age of
can't
consent?
consent to that.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't know. Like, if I
Do
use
you think a
liberal
10-year-old
thinking, I
can
just don't.
consent?
I don't believe so. No, at
Okay,
all.
and neither do I. So that point doesn't hold any water.
So what's the age of consent for you?
Well, I think that about 16 seems to be pretty applicable in most states across the country. I think it seems to be pretty functional.
16.
That does tend to be the age of consent, yeah.
You're saying legally that's the age of consent?
Yeah,
I
and I
thought it
think
was
it makes
18.
sense. Depends on the state.
Yeah. So you would have
So
you would
in
take a
the
moral
U.S., it depends on the state what the exact like age of consent is. It's typically
yeah,
16, 17, or 18 across the U.S. I know in the UK it's 16. Other countries it's going to vary, but yeah, about 16 seems right.
16 seems right for a same-sex marriage.
I don't know if I'm the biggest advocate of like 16-year-olds getting married. I think that that's probably something that's better to wait for. But you were talking specifically about the age of consent.
Yeah. Well, I'm just talking about ancient Greek civilization because they didn't have that. They had, I mean, if this what we would call a minor was just a person to them, and if they wanted to do this ceremony, they were allowed to. So this is the
So I'm
culture.
not advocating for that. My point was that there have been traditional definitions of marriage that included gay people
Where? Where?
in
Because I'm
ancient
not
Greece and ancient Mesopotamia.
ancient Greek, right? So you're bringing up the civilization that also allowed grown men to have these ceremonies with children. I'm just
I'm not
trying to,
condoning that.
yeah, I'm not
I'm
saying
I'm
you are. I'm just
simply
saying you're
I'm
using that
simply condoning.
civilization as your reference. So
Okay, and
so
I
when
mean
you say
if we're going to like ancient Christian like civilizations, there was a lot of heinous stuff that happened there too.
there was a lot of heinous stuff, well, ancient Christian would only go back to Jesus because before then we're talking about like Bronze Age Judaism, which isn't Christianity, and
Yeah, I mean, like
that's
there was slavery legal in in Jesus's time, and also the ancient Jews also practiced slavery.
sure, sure, and then
Like
you can talk
we
about.
can criticize elements of all these cultures, and I think that you are warranted to criticize elements of all these cultures. However, you trying to say that oh the traditional definition of marriage has always been that it's just a man and a woman, that's not true. There have been lots of traditional definitions of marriages that did include same-sex couples.
I don't think there. See, I disagree with you. Maybe I'm incorrect, but my understanding is that the like basic traditional definition of marriage, like for the vast amount of time, for the vast amount of societies, has simply been a man and a woman. That it hasn't been. They had
Well, it
ceremonies
would
like
depend on the exact society, but how can you say that your society dictates that you get to decide the definition for everyone?
you wouldn't get to. You would only get to decide it for your society. That's the whole question. Is like how a society defines itself.
Well, if you think that you should define it on like a societal level, why don't we just define it on like an individual level? If you want to marry somebody of the opposite sex, you at an individual level should be able to do so. And if somebody on an individual level wants to marry someone of the same sex, they should also be able to do so. Actually, this argument that we should specialize it is a great one, and it applies all the way down to the individual level.
I agree with that. Especially, I
Then
actually
you would
agree with
agree with
that.
gay marriage. If you agree with that, you would agree with gay marriage because even if gay people can get married, you can still get married as a straight person.
Right. I'm saying a person, regardless of whatever their religion is, if you're like, the issue comes down to, are
Then you
we
agree with gay
defining,
marriage. That's literally the argument for gay marriage that I've been making this whole time,
well, it's the argument for you're allowed to do what you want to do. It doesn't mean I agree
which
with what
includes
you
gay
do.
marriage.
You have the right to do, you have the right to do what you want to do. It's just, I have the right to choose whether I validate it or not. I mean, you can play
So
with
you would just like
tarot
go up to a
cards.
gay couple and say you're not married?
Well, to me, they're not already. Like
What do you gain from telling them that you don't see them as married?
I see them as in a civil union.
Okay, who cares what you think?
Well, that's fair enough. I mean, who cares what anyone thinks? But I mean, we live in a society, and it comes down to definitions. It's like,
Yeah,
do
and
I
we live
think
in a
people
society which upholds the institution of gay marriage.
right? So then it becomes a government definition. So it's not necessarily like your religion. We're talking like, what is marriage? What is marriage? Is a government contract?
Marriage is the legally or formally recognized union of two people as partners in a personal relationship.
Okay, but you say legally, and then the second part was or formally
Or
recognized.
formally. Yeah.
So what does that mean? That just means like culturally,
Like
right?
officially recognized. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the church today, like the Catholic Church doesn't recognize gay marriage, correct?
The Catholic Church does recognize gay marriage, I believe. Yeah, I think it depends on the exact on the exact Catholic, but like
I know, but there is an institutional standard. Like that's the whole point of the Catholic Church is that they have like a one catechism and like one thing they go by. They
so.
don't.
By the way, if Catholics want to marry whoever they want to marry by their own Catholic teaching, I'm okay with that. I just don't think that Catholics or any religion or any single tradition should have the right to say, you can't get married because of my tradition. I don't think that churches should be obligated to marry any arbitrary two people. I think that churches are allowed to have rules and regulations based off of the institute or based off of like their religious ceremonies and the people they marry. But I think that the state has no obligation to limit any two individuals who want to marry each other, so long as it's, obviously like of age and consenting.
Unless it's of age and consenting, right? So then we have a definition of marriage declared by a state, but it's not going to be so. My question is like, are you offended by a Catholic person that's like, well, you're actually not married according to Catholic definition? Do you see what I'm
I
saying?
think that they're silly to try to even bring that up. Like there's no reason why they should bring that up.
Well, it would come up in business if you come in to
How would
get
that come
something
up in
done.
business?
Well, if you want a wedding cake made from a wedding maker and there's two men on it, and then you say, we want this for our marriage, and then if it's Catholic ownership of the business, they're going to say, we don't believe in that.
Okay, so do you think that people should be able to like discriminate against types of people based off of like protected attributes in terms of like who they make the cake for?
I think it's a great question, and I don't necessarily know how I
Because
stand on this
we
other
already
than,
said we settled this debate in the 1960s with the American Civil Rights Act, where essentially the government decided, hey, just because you southern states might be uncomfortable with the existence of black people, you still have to provide business to black people.
yeah. So you would say that a Catholic owners of a cake company, they would be mandated by the government to make that cake, or they could be they would face
I think that
legal
they
action.
have no right to refuse service to people on the basis of protected attributes, the same way it would be wrong to refuse service to someone because they're black.
Yeah. So then at that point, they don't have the option anymore legally to believe in traditional marriage. They, by
No, they
law,
can have that personal
are.
belief. They just don't have the right to deny someone a cake because they're gay or because they're black.
See, to me, this is right. You're infringing on religious freedom at that point because what you're
And
doing
that's
is you're
no
going.
infringement on religious freedom at all, because
It
you
is.
are still allowed
It
to
is.
practice your religion. You are still allowed to, marry the people who you want based on your religious rules within your own religion. That doesn't infringe upon that at all.
It infringes upon the right of defining something the way you define it, right? When the government mandates to a business that you now have to change your definition of something and you have
And
to
that's not
create
what the
this
government's doing. The government is
it is.
not requiring you change your personal beliefs about marriage. They're just saying you can't deny people business on the basis of protected attributes, such as skin color or sexual orientation.
Skin color or right, but they're not. It's not denying a product because someone's gay. It's
Making
denying.
a cake is not changing the definition of marriage.
It is if you put two men on it and you make a religious person
That's
make it.
just a cake with two men. That has nothing to do with the definition of marriage.
How is making a wedding cake and saying like congratulations on your marriage and putting two men on it not part of that definition?
So you can,
Like
that like
Naomi, you're
you
smart.
can
You
like
know what I'm
personally
saying.
write, or you can personally write things that like you disagree with, even as like part of your business. Like newspapers print things that like individual editors disagree with like all the time.
Okay. Do you not understand my argument for like how this infringes on
Well,
upon religious
let's take
freedom?
your argument to its logical conclusion. Say we have a traditionalist Mormon who does not believe that like black people deserve the same rights as white people, and they do not want to sell a cake to a black person. Do you think that they should be allowed to say, "I'm not going to sell you a cake because you're black"?
No, I don't think they should have that right.
Okay, the exact same argument applies to the gay marriage case.
It doesn't because one has to
It
do with the
literally
definition.
does.
It doesn't
No,
though
no.
because one,
This ancient Mormon, their definition of human would have been such that it does not include black people.
I didn't even know Mormons were racist like that. I've never heard that. It's new to me.
It was
Mormons think
actually a
black.
Mormon teaching that like God changed his mind about black people in whatever year. Well,
Okay,
okay,
I'm not.
Mormon.
I'm not.
When did God change his mind about black people? When was that declaration? 1978. Yeah, prior to 1978, like Mormons did not believe that black people deserved the same human rights and status as white people.
Yeah, I mean, I
And so they
think
would have
that's
made this
horrible.
argument that it is against their religious belief to have to make a cake for black people.
Yeah. And so you equate that for religious people not being willing to make a cake for two gay men.
The argument is
It,
identical.
it's not identical when it's two different situations though, because one has to
So
do
the
with racial.
argument, I agree with you that the situation is different because we're swapping one protected attribute for another, but the argument is identical that it is wrong to deny somebody service or business on the basis of a protected attribute.
Yeah, I understand that there's a protected attribute there, but the situation isn't somebody coming in and saying, "Hi, I'm gay and it's my birthday. Would you make me a birthday cake?" The issue is different fundamentally because it has to do with the definition of marriage. It's
Right.
not
And in the
somebody
Mormon
denying.
case, in the Mormon case, it has to do with the definition of human.
Okay, I'm not Mormon. I don't think they should have the right to do that. It's wrong to
Okay.
diminish a
Then
human
you should
being.
not have the right to exclude to deny service to a gay person.
I wouldn't. And I wouldn't if that's the only issue present. The issue is the definition of marriage.
So nobody is saying
You
you have to change your own personal beliefs about marriage, just like you don't get to deny people service on the basis of them being gay.
Yeah, I don't think you should be able to deny people on the basis of being gay, but I do think if
Okay,
your
then they
religious
should bake the
view,
cake. Just like in the 1960s, they should bake the cake for a black person.
it's not this, it's a false equivalency, Naomi.
How is
And I
the
think
how
you
is it a
know
false
that
equivalency? How is it a
because you're
false
talking
equivalency?
because you're talking about a because one is a protected attribute and the other is forcing somebody to recognize a
Sexual
new
orientation and
definition.
race are both protected attributes.
I understand that. And if the person came in and they said, "I'm gay and I want a birthday cake," they shouldn't be denied. It's when you then force a religious person to change their view of marriage that it becomes a religious
So
violation.
the racist Mormons would argue that by requiring us to bake a cake for a black person, you are forcing us to change our definition of human. That is exactly what they tried to argue.
Yeah, but they were wrong because it's not the definition of human. Like
Exactly. They were
they
wrong. Just like the people trying to say, I'm not going to bake a cake for gay people are wrong. Thank you.
I think you have enough intellectual integrity to not like try to like hyper quickly create a straw man out of me. I think you know what
I'm
I'm
not creating a
saying.
straw man. I am just taking your argument to its logical conclusion. If a racist Mormon does not believe that black people are human, should they have the right to deny a cake that says "Congrats on being human" to a black person?
No, they
But that would
shouldn't.
but that
But
would
that's
require them to change their definition of human.
but like humans are what humans are. You're equating one definition
Yes,
with
and
another.
marriage is what marriage is.
Exactly. And what it's always been. Correct. I
And
agree.
marriage
Now we
includes gay
agree.
people.
Because recently they changed the definition.
Okay,
Right.
and
So,
Mormons
so you say
change the definition of human. This happens all the
this is what's
time.
funny. This is what's funny, Naomi. You said marriage is what it is and what it's always been. Then you
That's not
also
what I said.
acknowledge
That is not what I
you
said.
did.
I said
You
marriage
did.
is what it
You
is,
did.
which includes gay
You, and
people.
what it's always been is what you said.
That's not what I
That's what
said.
you said.
That's
It
not
is.
what I
It is
said.
what you
You
said.
were just lying right now.
I'm not lying. I'm
I
not
said
lying. That's
marriage
what you
is
said.
what it is, just like
And has
human
always
is what
been.
it is.
Yes, human is what it is and what human has always been. Human has not changed.
Well,
Neither
you know
has
that people had
marriage.
different definitions of human throughout all of history.
Well, listen, you've had me on. I appreciate it. I'm sorry if I offended you. I do believe in a traditional definition of marriage. It's
Nobody's
funny
trying to take
how
that away from you.
no, you're trying to mandate that I don't have the ability to like live my life according to that. You would
No,
harm me
you are literally
economically.
legally allowed to marry somebody of the opposite sex. Nobody is trying to take your right away to live by that definition personally. We're just
Yeah,
saying you
you
don't get
are.
to discriminate against others.
It's not discrimination. It's just the refusal to
No, it
participate in
is
a definition.
discrimination. It is
It's
discrimination
not.
to not allow gay people to marry. It is discrimination to say I'm not going to bake you a cake because you are gay.
It's not that I wouldn't allow them to marry. It's that the concept doesn't make any sense when you think of the definition. They
This
can
is the
have a civil
exact same
union.
argument that the racist Mormon would have made. You are making an argument that is identical to the argument that the racist Mormon would make.
It's not
We just don't
identical.
agree with the racist Mormon because the Overton window has moved over on that one. But your argument logically applies equally in both cases.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It's not the same thing.
You have failed to
Um,
explain how it's a false equivalent. You just said it was a false equivalency. You said it was a false
because
equivalency because one's a protected attribute, but both are protected attributes. Sexual orientation and race are both protected
I'm on
attributes.
the
You have not been
phone.
able to point to any reason why it's a false equivalency.
Alrighty. Well, I don't think we're going to get anywhere with this. We haven't got anywhere for a while, so
Well, yeah,
I
because you're
appreciate
wrong.
you having me on. I mean, I don't know if this is progress or not. I hope if you
I think
find
it
a
is.
union that makes you happy, that it is good for you.
Well, I hope you enjoy having a civil union with a woman